In this episode of the Sam Oldham Podcast, I'm joined by Kensley Behel of Neutral Deductions, long friend of the show. We've done many episodes now, and we're going to cover February's gymnastics in terms of the men's side of the sport and what's been happening from around the world. I'm coming in hot with the Welsh Gymnastics Championships, the Scottish Gymnastics Championships, who are the front runners heading into the English Gymnastics Championships next week, and then the British Championships. They're going to take place in March. I have watched the Winter Cup over the weekend. Kensley has watched it too. I'm going to be relying a little bit on Kensley for just the background on the US men's squad at the moment and what is going on. And also the Cottbus World Cup took place, which is always a great World Cup because, it's been a long-standing World Cup with a long history and tradition, and a lot of the best guys trust that World Cup because they know what they're going to get in terms of the equipment and the quality of the competition that they're going to be competing in terms of the rivals and the standard of the athletes that turn up to that event. So, this is going to be a great episode, Kensley. It's amazing to have you back on the show. I've been listening to all of your podcasts you've been releasing recently. You've been very, very kind and generous to us. I really, really do appreciate that. And I'm just happy, selfishly, that you're back sharing all the news from men's artistic gymnastics, because I don't have to go as far to find that anymore now that you're back doing your thing. So it's great to have you back, Kensley, promoting the sport of men's artistic gymnastics.
Thank you. This collab is one of my absolute favorites that I do all year.
Yeah, amazing. And we're going to start, Kensley, today with the Home Nations competitions, which were effectively the first competitions that took place of the ones that we'll cover that have happened throughout February. Welsh Championships. Did you see the scores, Kensley, and some of the routines? The Welsh Gymnastics Federation actually did an unbelievable job of live streaming the event. They had former athletes commentating on the event, and they, in many ways, do a much better job than what British gymnastics have tended to have done in the past. I was like, this is incredible, and I was kind of hoping that would give Scotland gymnastics a bit of a push to do the same for the Scottish competition. It wasn't quite the same, although they have been sharing things on social media. Just to bring you up to date with the performances, everybody that's listening, Adam Tobin won the all-around with 78.75. Very impressed with Adam. I had the opportunity to cover Adam's training sessions in January for the head coach at Nottingham, who was at the international training camp in Finland, and felt that Adam was very well prepared for this and is going to have a good year this year in 2026. Hamish Carter finished 7th, one of my good friends, and actually we just interviewed Justin Spring just before this, and Hamish was one of his athletes at the University of Illinois, and Hamish did very well as well, broke 77, and then in terms of the performances I'm going to pick out, Kensley, for me, Courtney, I was mainly looking at Courtney's D scores, to be honest. Courtney's challenge this year is going to be, how do I fit into this team when it becomes about team selection for the World Championships? So I was really interested in the D scores he put out. Ruben Ward obviously hit that massive score of 14.95 on pommels. Like listening to you talking on your podcast, I was dubious of the score and felt like that was probably somewhat inflated. However, he has gone on to hit another high score and broke 14.7 at the Scottish, which is probably more in line with where he's at, I think. And then any other standout performances, Jonas Rushworth just doesn't seem to be putting things together in the same way that he was 12 months ago in the lead up to qualifying for the Europeans team, where he was part of that team that won a gold medal. So Jonas is always somebody that I'm watching because his gymnastics is very exciting, has a lot of potential, but it just doesn't seem to be quite working for him at this moment. But that can change thick and fast because he's very talented, and we still have the English and the British to come. And then Zakane Forsey from Nottingham, one of the junior gymnasts that was the reserve for the Junior Worlds, only selecting to do a few apparatus, but beating a lot of the seniors on those two apparatus. And he's somebody that I think is going to push into the senior team over the next few years because he's that talented. They were the kind of routines and athletes that I picked out. George Atkins as well, one of the junior gymnasts, Kensley, from South Essex. I think he's going to be a strong contender for the junior European team in the summer, who have lost Sol Scott from the Worlds last year. I expect him to be almost a straight trade-in if he's fit and healthy. That was kind of my takeaways from the performances I was really looking at, Kensley. It's the Welsh Championships. In the past, typically, you wouldn't get many athletes that are English or Scottish competing in that event, but it is now an official selection event. So they can hit scores quite early in the year. And I always feel like that goes one of two ways. Either you go out there and you hit a great score and you put everybody else that hasn't competed yet under pressure, or you have a bad competition and all of a sudden, it's a result that maybe isn't going to swing your way in a selection event. Did you get a chance to see anything, Kensley, from the Welsh?
I did. I watched it, and I do just want to commend Welsh Gymnastics for putting on quite a good stream, because it was really lovely to be able to watch it. And I thought Emil Barber did quite a good job commentating the event and was very informative of not only the deductions that were happening, but also what was at stake for each of the gymnasts and which gymnasts were trying to hit which scores. And like you, I was very interested to watch Courtney. And one thing that stood out to me is he was doing 3 double flipping skills on parallel bars, and you barely see people doing one of those skills. And I kind of wondered, I was like, oh my goodness, is this type of routine going to end up being like what has happened on pommel horse, where they're limiting the amount of flared skills that can be done and things of that nature? And I kind of wondered if he is going to be the model for what could happen on that event. Like you mentioned, Ruben did a very good pommel horse routine. When I saw the score, I was like, no way, no freaking way. And then I went and watched the routine, and it was actually a very good routine. I don't think it was quite high enough, quite a good routine to only have, I think it was 0.75 off, especially with just having watched Kotbus and seeing what Gabrielle Targeta and Mamo Khachatrian and Kurbanov and some of these other athletes, like what their scores are and how internationally they're evaluating pommel horse. I think at the World Cup, we'll probably see him down another 3 or 4 tenths based on what I'm seeing internationally. But overall, I would say put his name absolutely in the pile of one of routines to watch. And, we still haven't gotten Reese back and Max back. Like, they're coming back within the next couple of weeks to competition. And so it'll be interesting to see how they stack up there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think Ruben is somebody that last year for me showed a lot of promise and potential and maybe faltered in the big moments. So particularly the British Championships was someone in the podium training in the build-up that looked very strong, did well at the Scottish going into that, and then had mistakes at the British Championships. But I remember seeing him do a triple twist on vault and thinking, that's somebody that could potentially be dangerous over the next couple of years. And then his progress that continued throughout the year. And I know that Ruben was doing a lot of those online competitions, so like the Allevian competitions, and he was winning a lot of those. He wasn't quite able to put in the consistency in the World Championship trials that Alex Yolchin-Cash was. And it was effectively that spot at the Worlds was between those two. And Alex came out on top because he hit 5 for 5 routines. I think that will have massively motivated Ruben going into this year, and I think both of those gymnasts are going to benefit from the fact that they are almost going to be going head to head all the time. Now, it's very exciting that you're going to now put Max back into that fold, and whether or not Max is able to keep up with the relentless energy of youth that they're going to both have, I don't know, and that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, right? And very, very different styles. It's like 2 generations are going to clash. Alex and Ruben represent the new pommel worker that is Gabrielle Targeta. That routine, that long, slender, multiple travels, sewn work. Effectively, all of those guys now are ending up with the same routine, and it is whoever can do triple Russian on one handle. That's what it is, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how Ruben fits into that, and to see them go head to head, Alex and Ruben potentially at the British. Ruben is taking the advantage at the moment because Alex had a mistake at at the Welsh. Ruben has then gone to the Scottish, hit an 81 all around, which we'll talk about a little bit after this. And then I imagine they'll both do English, and then we'll get to see them at the British. So it's going to be really interesting to watch that, because they're both competitive on the world stage. But like we've said many times, pommel horse is the most competitive apparatus. When it comes to Courtney's parallel bars routine, Kensley, I think Courtney just benefits from the fact that he learned all of those skills in go back 2 cycles. So for him to add those skills in, it's super easy. I don't think lots of gymnasts are going to adapt to that kind of a routine because they haven't trained them from a young age. What you're seeing now is that whole generation of trained Bavassars and under semi half and Makuts. So you're seeing so many of those routines are exactly the same. Like the Cottbus World Cup was effectively the same routine for everybody in that top 3, right? They're all doing an under semi half, an under semi, a Makuts, a Bavassar, and a double front half. Courtney's routine maybe stands out because he's of a different time when it comes to parallel bars, because he's been around for so long. I don't think you're going to see too many gymnasts doing the same routine of doing 3 double backs, but I think you will see a lot more of them, probably from the countries that have the generational knowledge of teaching those skills. So the Chinese, for example, and the Japanese, they'll be able to, a lot of those athletes that would perform those skills are now their coaches. So they'll be able to teach those gymnasts those skills very, very quickly. So yeah, that would be what I'd say there with Courtney. But he did a 5.5 on floor, a 5.7 on rings, a 5.3 on parallel bars, and a 5.2 on a vault, obviously with a Dragulescu. I think first competition, yeah, I'm quite impressed with those D scores. They're very competitive. We're yet to see Harry go out there and do a competition. We'll probably see him at the English this weekend. So I think, yeah, good start for Courtney, to be honest. I think when you consider the fact that he's a dad, he's the age that he's at, he's been around for as long as he has. He competed at the majors last year. To be back out this early in the year competing again, he's not showing any signs of slowing down. So, I was really impressed with him at that competition. I think for Adam, obviously the guy that won and put out the first score for a British athlete all around, I think he will just be really happy to have gone 6 for 6, and he'll be hoping to have settled into his new training environment in Nottingham over the past 18 months and hopefully get out there and start putting some big scores out there all around. I think he's got the capacity to push 80 plus for sure. Adam is a very, very well-balanced all-around gymnast. I think that makes him quite dangerous. He doesn't really have a standout weak apparatus. Even pommels, where he's a little bit bigger, he actually does have a pretty clever, smart routine, and he performs very well on pommel horse. And on rings, he's strong. So he did a downgraded routine, but he's capable of doing a 4.8 on rings. I expect Adam to be pushing 80 plus. And in Britain, we didn't have many athletes last year, Kensley, that pushed 80 plus. There wasn't many gymnasts that did that. So, if he can do that, he puts himself in contention for the major championships taking place throughout the rest of this year. Did you see many of Adam's routines?
I did not see any of his routines, but, the 80 mark is becoming more and more notable. Even at Winter Cup, there was only one athlete who broke the 80 mark, and that was Fred.
Yeah.
And even throughout the year, there have not been that many athletes who have broken 80 quite yet. So yeah. I think that's very encouraging for him, and I look forward to seeing what he does later on in the year, whichever competitions he shows up at.
Absolutely. And I think for me, the standouts in the juniors, we're only selecting some of the performances from these competitions, but Zakane is somebody that needs to be watched going into the rest of this year because, I spoke to him about how many apparatus he did. I think he's still coming back from somewhat of a lower limb injury and issues that he's been having. His weakness has always been rings, but I know that he's working an Azerian to cross. And all of a sudden, if you're doing a 5.2 on high bar as a junior, a 5.5 on pommels, he's got a triple twist on vault. His floor, he's very, very good on floor. He'll be pushing close to a 5.5, I would imagine. All of a sudden, with an Azerian on rings and a mid-4 start value, his parallel bars is good. He's going to be he'll be a 5 probably on P-bars. That's somebody that I'd expect to be pushing for the senior team pretty quickly. And I would say that about all of the juniors that have been part of that junior worlds team, that junior Europeans team the year before that won the gold.
They're so good.
that is an issue for a lot of these guys that are experienced seniors. They need to be careful because these juniors their like threshold, the risk tolerance, the level of gymnastics they're doing is pretty unbelievable. I mean, you've got these 16 and 17-year-olds just doing Cassinas, Colemans, triple twists on vault like it's the norm. So that's very exciting. Let's look at the Scottish Championships, Kensley. I would say Scotland have the best chance of pushing for a team medal out of Scotland and Wales. It doesn't mean that it's not possible for Wales, but the Scottish team looks pretty strong. Ruben obviously hit an 81, which is a big score when you consider that at the Winter Cup there was only one score over 80. Looking at his start values, I think that was a realistic score. I don't think that was inflated. So, he's going to be really thinking about pushing for the British Championships next month and kind of putting six pieces together. He's doing a great job of sharing content online on his social media and talking about his journey towards the Commonwealth Games and becoming a Commonwealth champion. He's being somewhat ambiguous about what he expects that to be on, whether he expects that to be in the all-around or pommel horse. I don't think it matters really. We just get to see his training and his progress. And then you had Cammy Lynn, who came back and did a lot better at the Scottish, broke 78, and then Hamish 76.7. So that Scottish team for me, I think Ruben, Cammy Lynn and Hamish are lock-ins. I'd say Pavel probably is as well. Pavel Karnienko is coming back after not training properly for, I don't even know, like 2 years, 3 years. Pavel, his full-time job is selling cars and he does a bit of gymnastics on the side. And he's legitimately, I think, going to make a Commonwealth Games again, which is another great story in itself. Hit 4 out of 4 routines. I think he hit qualification scores, and then it will just be one place up for grabs on that Scottish team. So, did you see any of the Scottish, Kensley, and what do you make of that competition?
With them not having this stream, and also with Cupbus and Winter Cup going on this weekend, I had a lot on my plate. So I would love to see some routines, hopefully later on their social media. I think one of the things that I was slightly confused about, and I'm hoping you can clear up, is if I read the British documents right, it seems like they have learned from the 2022 year when, let's say, like the English had the Commonwealth Games and European Championships and World Championships, and they basically sent the same team to all three, and they ended up injured. So how does that factor in for like Scottish athletes per se?
Well, this is where it gets quite interesting, Kensley, because I've heard that the Welsh and Scottish gymnasts have been told that they can compete at the Commonwealths and go for the Europeans, but the English have been told that they can't. So there are certain members of the English contingent that are not happy with that and would like to be involved in the Commonwealth Games and the European Championships, and that it will be giving, I'd imagine, the head coaches and the national staff some headaches, because it reminds me very much of 2014 in that you have a pommel horse worker coming out of retirement who is well versed in the sport, how it works with sponsors, how it works with your image, where the eyeballs are, and the eyeballs are normally on the Commonwealth Games, and they will have management that understand this too, and they will, I imagine, want to be part of that Commonwealth Games. And then you've got other members of the team that maybe have been in the team for the last few years and are winning medals right now, and they're probably going to think, well, if that guy gets to go, why can't I? So I think it's going to be a bit of an interesting one to see how that all plays out. I don't know how you can say one rule for the Scottish and the Welsh athletes and a different rule for the English. Whether that all gets scrapped, I don't know. And that decision might have been made already, but that's what I've heard from a few people. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. But you're right to ask that question. Purely from a British point of view, the priority, I think, would be resting those athletes and not letting anybody do the three majors, particularly if they compete on multiple apparatus. It's just how you go about enforcing that. and getting everybody to buy into it. If you're saying that's going to be a different rule for the Scottish athletes and the Welsh athletes, because at the end of the day, the Commonwealth Games is a massive opportunity to perform in a multi-sport event, it brings a big spotlight, it raises your profile. You get to be on TV, right? How many opportunities are there to be on TV? And for the athletes and their career and their ability to make money, it's huge. So missing out on that is a big deal. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out and the politics of that.
Yeah, and I'm looking ahead towards the World Championships where the top 3 will lock in their spot for the Olympics. And so I know from the U.S. contingent and their side of things in the documents that they've put out, they have said we are willing to potentially leave some medals on the table, some individual medals on the table to increase the team score to try and guarantee and lock in that spot for a home Olympics. And so for the British team, I assumed that they would probably also have some sort of similar goal of maybe being willing to leave some of those medals on the floor to be able to say, hey, we want to be the people who lock in that medal, because you kind of assume China and Japan are going to get that spot. Mm-hmm. And then you sort of go, okay, is it going to be the British? Is it going to be the Americans? Is there going to be this other team that sneaks in there? So long term, I would love to know from the British leadership, where is their priority? Is it on these sort of like Commonwealth Games and Europeans and things of that nature, or is it like, no, we want to lock in this year for the Olympics?
Yeah, and it's tricky, Kensley, right? Like I'm always going to side on I'm going to side with the athlete, and the reality is, for the past, I'd argue for at times the past couple of Olympic cycles in Great Britain, we've prioritised individual medals. We've said that out loud. So it's the amount of medals. So you can't now turn around and change the rules of the game and say, oh, no, now it's the team comes first. Because the athlete is going to think, well, I'm not sure that I trust that. What happens if I make a personal sacrifice here for my own career to help the team? Now, the sell, I'd imagine, will be, but if the team qualifies, that gives you a better chance of being at the Olympics, right? So it's going to be, it's going to take a strong leader to certainly sell that and get everybody to buy in. And what normally happens is once you get to a certain level of success, you start to be able to use your leverage and kind of push that around the chessboard a little bit. And that works as long as you are the top dog and you have the leverage. And there's an argument that while you've got the leverage, you should really use it, because as soon as it's gone, you've not got that anymore.
Right.
But I mean, purely if I'm in the shoes of the national coaching staff, my priority is getting that top 3 spot done early so we can not relax, but it takes the pressure off. Otherwise, you've got to really focus on that World Championships again in 2027. But look, it's going to be no easy task in of itself of getting that top 3. So they might look at it and go, as a team right now, we're just not quite ready to get that top 3, and we've got a better shot at being top 3 in 2027. But yeah, that's going to be really interesting, and it'll be great to see how that unfolds. I don't know what the right answer is to that. I don't know whether, I've grown up with a Soviet gymnastics philosophy and system and culture. And the idea is the stronger your team, as a byproduct, you can't be a medal winning team without good all-arounders, and you can't be a medal winning team without people with potential in individual apparatus finals. Like, that doesn't add up. In order to be one of the best teams in the world, you're going to have to, as a byproduct, have strong all-rounders and apparatus potential. And that's kind of how I was hardwired. So that's always how I lean. But it hasn't done GB any harm in terms of the medal table at the past 3 Olympic Games. It just means we haven't won a team medal. But that's only one medal, right? And the argument would be there are 6 individual apparatus medals and 3 all-around medals up for grabs, and now a mixed team up for grabs. So, a lot of this comes down to the direction that maybe the national staff are going, but the sport as a whole in Great Britain, what the target is. maybe doesn't answer your question, but it's very interesting. It's going to be exciting to watch it unfold and see who wins out in the end and whether or not we see athletes going to Commonwealth, Euros and Worlds. I mean, I've spoke to those athletes that did that in 2022, Kensley, and they all said it was way too much. So they're also not going to be wanting to do that. But I don't think they're going to be able to come out and outwardly say, I want to go to the Commonwealths, but I don't want to go to the Euros.
Yeah, I think it takes a very special athlete to know how to pace themselves. And I think, I always go back to Shane Wiskus's interview with you, and he talks about when he fell at nationals before Olympic trials and he kept going, and he was like, yeah, someone probably should have stopped me. And I think like there is something when you get to this really elite level of competition where you thrive on that energy and that adrenaline, and you want to compete and you want to go. And now with, again, these sponsorships, it is like a livelihood. And if I can win one more medal, I can make that much more money or, get my name in front of the judges. And so I think the responsibility sometimes of the national staff is to like potentially preserve them as long as there's that healthy relationship and it's not a control tactic. But sometimes I feel like a lot of the elite athletes just don't understand like for their long-term health, that maybe doing that many large competitions in a year is ultimately maybe not going to get them to their ultimate goal, which for many is the Olympic Games, because they may be too injured.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, Kensley. It's a difficult thing, right? We just had that conversation with Justin Spring as well. He was somebody that burnt very brightly, but for a very short amount of time. But was probably always going to be an athlete that did that. He was wired that way. And there is an argument that, if you are there in the thick of it, you make the most of it while it's there, because it could be gone tomorrow. So it's a tricky thing, that is. And it's a lot about timing, right? I always get a little bit worried when someone has the best year of their career 3 years out from an Olympic Games, because I think that's a long time to hold on, But I'm excited about the Scottish team. It's in Glasgow. Yeah. There'll be a home advantage. They did very well in 2014, the Scottish team. Best Commonwealth Games ever. I know that they're trying to bring on that team to the Games to be part of it. Scotland do a great job of looking after their athletes. That's one thing I will say. All of those athletes, top athletes in Scotland, are getting paid this year, which is amazing. For the Commonwealth Games in 2014, they all got given, if they won a medal, they were given prize money upon retirement. So my teammates, Dan Purvis, Dan Keatings, Frank Baines, they were given, if they win a gold medal, I think they were given £10,000 on the day that they officially retired, which is an amazing thing to do. So it's not when you get the result, it was when you retire. So it's supposed to be somewhat of a pension fund, I guess, almost in a way, which is really cool. And I expect them to do very well. And you look at that team, like Ruben, Cami Lynn, Hamish, Pavel, that's an experienced team. They could cause Australia, Canada, and depending on the English team, some issues if they were to make mistakes. So that will be very exciting, and I think it will be a great team final, the one at the Commonwealth Games. And it's always an exciting year when you get a Commonwealth Games, because it's just an extra major championships, and you always get somebody that competes at that Commonwealth Games that seems to be able to transition into the World's team. That normally happens. That guy in 2010 was Max, and then he moved. Niall in 2014 and then transitioned in. And it might be that no, it actually won't. I was going to say, because the Euros falls after, none of those juniors are going to be able to do that. Normally, it's a good opportunity for a junior to jump into the seniors, but, they will have to make the big jump to the World's stage if any of them are going to do that. But that was kind of the Welsh and the Scottish. Was there anything else that stood out for you, Kensley, from those events?
I think we covered them really well, and I'm looking forward to the English that's coming up and then the British as well.
Yeah, and I expect at the English we'll see most of everybody competing. A lot of people elected to not compete at the Welsh, and the Scottish was just the Scottish athletes. There was no kind of open event there for the men. There was in the women's. Let's go to the Winter Cup then, Kensley. I watched all of the competition. I listened to the commentary as well, which was great. It does seem to me from the outside, I don't know whether you agree, that people are starting to cotton on, particularly the federations, that we need to do more ourselves in terms of promoting the sport, promoting the athletes, putting on our own live streams, which is really cool. I really enjoy that. The Welsh is doing it, the British is doing it. the Winter Cup, they had their own athletes in commentating. It's brilliant. I really, really enjoyed that. So, yeah, I don't know whether you agree. From the outside, I'm looking into the sport and going, we're moving in the right direction. People are having the right conversations and almost asking me to do things or asking for advice on things they're doing. I'm going, yeah, you should be doing that. That's great. Please do it. I know in the lead up to the British, I was in talks with British Gymnastics about them doing a podcast with the athletes in the build up to the competition. And I was like, yes, definitely do that. That's a great idea. You should be doing that because you have the access, direct access to the athletes. Yeah. What did you make of the, I guess the live stream? Because is what you watched, Kensley, just to start off with, and then we'll just cover the performances.
I was really pleased that there was a live stream with commentary. That hasn't always been the case for Winter Cup, and very familiar with Paul Judah and Christian Marsh. Christian Marsh actually volunteers and helps out with Neutral Deductions, and then Paul Judah was at my alma mater at University of Michigan, and they offer this balance between Paul, who is at, the Olympic and the world and the highest level, but Christian is really a technician and he's a judge. And so having someone who can tell stories and then someone who can get into the nitty gritty of it, I think makes for a good pairing. I will say that they cursed so many athletes. I started making a running list. Like Christian Marsh said, I wanted Max Auden to go on high bar and I wanted that on the stream. And then he one arms a Lucan. And then they say, oh, Shane Wiskus is very consistent and has this veteran status that's going to carry him through. And then he has multiple falls on high bar. They say P-bars is his best event. He falls on his Healy. Paul Judah said June Away is amazing and he should be in the 2028 conversation. Then he face plants on floor. They say, Danilo Lake and his line is so amazing. And then he falls off pommel horse. Like it was just one after the other. And I was like, oh my God, stop talking about these athletes. And Christian actually told me after that he personally went and apologized to a couple of them.
Yeah, sometimes that's the way it goes, right? It was good for me. I'm going to be doing potentially some commentary at the British this year, which will be a new thing for me to do. I've obviously done some presenting and I do my podcast. It's very conversational. I was watching as somebody that was trying to pick up how I'm going to approach that commentary. And I agree that they were a great pairing. I think because Christian is used to doing a podcast and will be very similar to me, at times you can forget that, okay, the person at home is watching the routine and I need to be describing what's happening in the routine. And that's something just for me. And not that, look, I don't know whether that was their first time doing that as a pair, but I think for me, I was just picking up. I was watching it like somebody trying to learn how to commentate. And I was thinking, okay, I need to remember to not do that because I've got a big gob. And I will just go off and talk about, wow, this backstory, when actually I need to kind of focus on not that didn't, I love the backstory, but maybe somebody back home might be really focusing more on like okay, what did I just see in that routine? Does that make sense? And it was different. I think the format was challenging for them because they brought in guests. And so then they're kind of doing 3 different roles at once, right? It certainly isn't a critique. It's just, I'm learning because I'm going to do that. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I need to remember that this isn't a podcast. I'm commentating on this. But I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the hard things is, so I've worked with NBC on their broadcast nationally and internationally. And then, of course, the way I got into international elite gymnastics was actually volunteering with USA Gymnastics. So I've kind of seen both sides of things. And with the high level broadcast, I spoke about this on my podcast. They'll often spend a lot of time watching people, chalk up their hands at the chalk bucket or, follow them to sit on the chairs. And that offers a lot of time to tell stories, which are really interesting. Like I still to this day remember Tim Daggett telling the story at 2012 Olympic trials about how Sam Mikulik had injured his ankles the year before and he had made this incredible comeback and now was potentially going to make this team. And that story is what drew me into men's gymnastics. And so the stories are really, really important. Like that's what draws in new listeners. But I think you also have to retain the nerdy fans as well. And you have to talk about the routine and what you're seeing and educate them in that way. So I think with the USA Gymnastics stream, they did so much whip around coverage that there was no time really to tell the stories. And so it was almost like the commentators couldn't take a breath because there was so much in front of them. And so it sort of depends on what is being fed to you to commentate on. And then that just helps, I think, guide the listener a little bit better.
Yeah, and I'm thinking out loud with that, Kensley, and almost asking, you've worked with the NBC at the Olympic Games, and almost asking, what is that difference between the people that are kind of part of the presenting team in that studio and then the commentators, and when do you jump in, when do you not jump in, what do people... That's just something I'm going to have to learn, right? But it was great as like a learning project to kind of watch those guys do it, and I think they did a great job, and I'm really happy that USA Gymnastics were number one using one of their Olympic medalists in Paul Judah, right, to do that, because it's just amazing that they've got somebody that actually has been there, done it, and this is what all of these competitions are building up towards, right? It's the LA Olympic Games, so that's amazing, and hopefully he gets the opportunity to do more. And I also agree that Christian brings an incredible technical eye and a lot of insight and knowledge to... I mean, his knowledge of just all of those athletes, some of which I don't know and haven't heard of and won't follow them, was brilliant. It was absolutely amazing. He knew every skill that was coming up before it came.
Yeah.
I hope we get to hear more of that in the future, whether it's at, US Championships, Olympic trials, or the American Cup. Hopefully that's the first of many opportunities for them. Let's go on to the actual gymnastics then, Kensley. Let's talk about the all-around. And the top three. Let's focus on the top three, and then we'll pick out some of the other noticeable performances. Let's start with the champ then, Fred Richard. Looked incredibly professional performance to me from where I was. Felt like he had a better balance to his routines this year than he did last year, and a construction, although it still feels like to me he's still... one skill on each piece is quite weak and doesn't really fit, and I imagine that's because he's just not ready to put that bigger skill in. Whether it's the B one-arm giant on high bar or a Stockley B on pommels, whatever it is, it's like one skill short on most of those pieces, which is amazing because it means he's got a lot of room to grow. They don't look like his final routines to me, just the foundations of what they will look like over the next couple of years as we build into LA. My one big question is going to be, he spoke a little bit afterwards about pushing for a world championship gold medal. What vault do you think he's going to end up doing? Because, with the standard of all-around athletes, a CAS 1.5 or 2.5 twist, it's just not strong enough. And what did you make?
Unless you're Oka.
And what do you... Well, yeah, but what I would say is that was somewhat of I felt like Oka in Paris was a case of him capitalizing on other people not being at their best rather than everybody being at their best, and I think that's why he came up stuck last year and started to struggle. What would you say to his performance, Kensley? What was your initial reaction?
Initial reaction was complete and total surprise because there was a lot of doubt about Fred going into this meet because he had not done all around in NCAA up to this point, and he just spent the week prior at the Olympics, like doing social media for Team USA, and we were kind of like, okay, he's flying back. I think it was like 3 or 4 days before the meet. And I guess he's going to show up and compete, and we'll see how this goes. And I was very impressed with what he was able to put on the floor. I think part of that was also it was a one-day competition, and previous years, Winter Cup has been a 2-day competition for as long as I can remember. So, that's something as well. But you bring up a good point about his vault. So Fred in some ways reminds me of John Orozco, if you remember competing against him. John was this incredible all-arounder who really struggled to find an upgraded vault that would work for him. And he went through, I don't know how many vaults. So we've seen Fred do handspring double front. We've seen him try Dragolescu. We've seen him do cos 1.5 for a long, long time. And I agree with you that I think probably he needs to upgrade that vault. I just don't know what that is going to look like and what is going to feel comfortable for him.
Yeah, I agree. And I've been in that position myself. I think I ended up trying about 4 or 5 different vaults. I tried triple twist, Yurchenko double pike, Dragolescu, handspring 2.5. You can end up in a position where the most obvious answer is probably the right answer. And you've spent your whole career doing a CAS 2.5, just work a triple until it's ready. And that might end up being the right vault, is that he adds that extra half twist and he spends his time working on that block until it becomes good enough for him to fit in that extra half twist rather than fundamentally work on a brand new vault. That might end up being what he does. He might end up just pushing towards a triple twist and thinking, well, even if this is not ready until the end of 27, that's okay because my end goal is the Olympics. And he strikes me as the type of athlete now that I imagine he, is desperate to become a world champion, but it doesn't matter to him whether that's this year or next year. If it's next year, that's fine. The end goal is LA and I want to be at my very best then. That's when I want to peak. And I just don't think he's fazed by the doubts and the questions. He's just very much... All I imagine that does is give him more motivation because he probably quite likes it. He strikes me as the type of person that needs somewhat of an imaginary enemy to go up against to get him motivated. He's probably a very talented guy, right? So he needs something to fight against. I think that's why he pushes back with his kit and go into the Winter Olympics when, really should be here preparing for the competition. He's probably the type of person that is so naturally talented and gifted in that way as well that he needs to mentally be stimulated and he needs quite a lot of challenges. And sometimes that's a challenge to, just for him to do 3 months of perfect training with no interruption, that would be his idea of a nightmare. He probably needs to be a bit up and down and in and out, very much like Niall Wilson was, up until when Niall had his serious injury with his neck. So he reminds me of that a little bit. And when you look at his performance, he's so far out in front of second place. He is one of the athletes for me that is just such a well-balanced all-arounder. He has the potential to be one of the top all-arounders and win a medal in LA or at the World Championships. I think of all the athletes at the moment currently in the US, he has the best shot of that. We'll wait and see whether a junior might come up, and there might be some other juniors that might come out of nowhere. I'm sure there will be in the next couple of years. But even if I look at Danila, I'm just not sure 100% how his ring strength is going to develop. There's kind of like an obvious weakness there on rings. He's only super young, so he might get really, really strong. And I know the guys at Evo are all they're clearly doing the same S&C program because they're all getting super, super strong, right? Yeah. And they're going to learn from Sam and Syke and everybody there, but you just don't know. We had this chat with Justin Spring, and I talked about how much do genetics play into being the best all-arounder in the world. And we kind of agreed that they do play quite a big role when it comes to all 6, because you have to be so well balanced. That's kind of my thoughts on Fred, but his gymnastics to me I was really, really impressed. Doing the Cassina and the Lucan in the same routine. His double straight on floor was just perfection. His pommel horse looked really solid. I like the combination with the triple Russian in the middle, straight to the Tong Fei and into his flares. I like that. On rings, that top planche always looks a little bit iffy, but I can see him adding in a backward rise to Maltese instead of the extra inlocate that he's doing potentially, which is going to give him 4/10 basically on his rings routine. Vault is just that question for me. What is going to be that big vault that he does? But everywhere else, he looks like one of the top half a dozen all-arounders in the world at the moment.
I think, his big competition in the U.S. is Asher Hong and has been Asher Hong for a long time. And with the U.S. still maintaining actually a pretty high-level bonus system. So originally the idea was they were going to graduate the bonus system down, but it didn't really change that much aside from they raised, I think, the parallel bar D-score minimum and a couple other things like that. But Asher gets a point of bonus alone for doing his Rise Guang. Fred did not even, I believe I'm correct in saying he did not even have a point in bonus for his entire competition. So as long, and that's still the one title that Fred is missing. So he has Winter Cup, he has NCAA, he has Olympic trials, but he does not actually have a national title yet. And I don't think as long as the bonus system stays this high, it's going to be really tough for him to get that title.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you make, Kensley. And I would say it would be, look, being a national champion is important, because if you're trying to get selected for a World Championships or an Olympics, it's almost impossible for them not to take the national champion if it's in close proximity to that major championships. So that's why it's really important. But for Fred, I don't think he's even playing that game. In his head, I think all he's worried about is, I'm sure he'd love to be the national champion, but if he can be a world champion or an Olympic champion or a world all-around medalist or Olympic all-around medalist, and he misses out on a national title, I don't think he'll be too bothered. I think he's that type of an athlete. I think he's playing kind of a different game to the game that everybody else is playing, and I think that's why he wasn't fazed at all by going to Italy, flying back, doing the competition. I think he thrives in that kind of situation, and I think in him we've seen a new model for an athlete, somebody that understands brand, understands the sport, and that they need to do all of the work and all of the training, but I think that's what it is now. You can't be one, or you have to be both to have a career and make a lot of money. And, that's what a lot of the athletes want to do. They want to win the Olympic medals, but they also want to, get their just reserves for the time and the effort that they put in. I was super impressed with Fred, and I think he's going to do, some brilliant things this year. And he's certainly the athlete that I think the US could build the team around. And I agree that Asher can push him really, really hard, right? And that bonus comes into play. And there might be certain pieces where he's really far ahead, but I just think Fred's balance as an all-rounder, I just see him with the most potential, particularly because I do think he has a weak skill on every piece that he can trade for a big skill fast and get a lot of D-score. What did you think to Yule, Kensley?
Yeah, impressed with Yule. He added in about a point in difficulty from Rocky Mountain Open, which was the event that he needed to qualify to Winter Cup from. So really impressive when you think about he's only been back a handful of months. There's a couple skills I would say maybe he's still missing from his program. So previously he had like a lead kneeing in his pommel horse routine. I'm not sure he's going to add it back with the drop from the 10 skills down to 8. I'm not sure if he'll add that back in. On floor, we saw him have a triple twist dismount instead of a double flipping, so he's incurring some neutral deductions there, so still quite a long way to go. We haven't quite seen him break that 80 mark, and I think Yule's real strength has been as an all-arounder, and I think will need to be a little bit stronger before he officially comes into that conversation for the world team. But having seen what he's done in such a short amount of time, I think he is very likely to be in that conversation come this fall. I'll also say he gave us an incredible opportunity for comedy when he went for his combination pass on floor and just kind of like overcooked it and went straight to prone. And I'm like, if you're going to fall, you might as well make it funny for everyone else. So not that you want any athlete to fall, of course, but it was very stylish.
Yeah, I agree. And he certainly, with that fall on floor, that there's an 80 plus score there, right, already, which is brilliant. And I think the big thing for Yule, he just has that international line. Not that that's even a real thing, but his gymnastics performs very well internationally because it's so stylish and his execution is really high. His frame looks so light that I imagine he can just take a lot of volume, and that might mean that he's going to be able to carry on for a long time. So I certainly wouldn't count him out of being in contention by LA. And one thing I would say about Yule is that I think he's got better with age, and he's somebody that has been able to really improve his weaknesses as time has gone on. High bar and pommel used to stand out as massive, massive weaknesses for him in terms of an all-around competition, but his pommel horse and his high bar right now are, for events where he's struggled in the past, he's done such a good job throughout his career of continuing to improve all the way through his career. Some people get set at a routine and then never move on and never try to push that beyond where they're at maybe their early 20s. But yours just continue to improve on those two apparatus. And, I have a lot of respect for him for that, because it's probably not easy. Whereas somewhere on floor and parallel bars, where it comes a bit it's more natural for him. You can continue to learn new things and add in extra skills, and it's exciting. But to keep pushing yourself on your weaknesses is, that says a lot about his character, I think. When I heard you speaking a little bit about his parallel bars routine and his score, Kensley, I thought his score I didn't think it was too generous. What was his start value on his P-bars routine?
He was at 5'4", and
Okay.
I think the person I was co-hosting with was asking me if I thought it was an inflated score or not, and I was so tired. I was like, I can't even remember what it looked like, so I didn't want to say if I felt it was.
I think the only thing I would say is the way Yule does his double front half dismount, there are quite a lot of built-in deductions. What I mean by that is the way he kicks it out. He almost kicks out so much he has to pike in to land. So if I'm a harsh international judge, I'm watching how low his chest is when he lands every time. He doesn't land it with his chest up very often. And a lot of it, if you watch the three guys in Cottbus, they kind of swing it around the side by holding onto their legs. But when they land with their chest right up. And as a judge, if you're judging it and you see somebody's chest drop below their hips, you stop for a moment and go 3 or a 1. What am I taking? And that's the only thing I think that stands out. Everything else is like almost perfect in terms of his execution on parallel bars. So that'd be the only area that maybe he would get a little bit more deduction than maybe he did in that routine. But he's a beautiful technician on parallel bars. I think people forget as well, he's a world medalist on floor.
Yeah, in 2017 in Montreal. Interesting that you bring up the judging. One thing that I did want to bring to your attention was, I think I've mentioned before that the U.S., the coaches and the judges sort of butt heads on what is the best way to adjudicate. And there's some of the coaches believe that because the U.S. historically has had judges specialize on events, that they end up taking maybe more deductions than at a world competition where they do the E-score draw right before you march out. And so this competition, they actually changed how they were doing the judges. So the D-score judges were assigned ahead of time, but the E-score judges were actually pulled in a draw right before the competition. So they are now trying it out to see if mimicking the way it's done internationally will help create some parity between domestic and international scores.
Yeah, I mean, as long as, for me, I would always steer on the side of being harsher back home so you get better scores when you go internationally. The area you get caught out is if you have inflated scores back home and then you go compete internationally and the scores are lower, and psychologically you're on the back foot straight away and you're like, what? I thought I was a 90 gymnast back in the day when I was a gymnast, and all of a sudden you're an 88. Or I thought I was an 82 gymnast, now I'm a 79. What's going on? So I think I would always steer. My coach used to do that. Sergey used to do that with me, and it used to do my head in. I remember the set parallel bars routine I had to do when I was, I think I was 11 years old. He would judge that routine in training and give me a 9.2. I'd be like, I'm convinced there's nothing I can do to make this more perfect. And he did that for 6 months. And then I went to the competition and I took a step on the dismount, and the judge, she was a really nice lady, her name was Jan, she said, I was going to give you a 10 if you stuck that straight back. And I was like, what? Sergey's been giving me a 9.2 for the past 6 months. And I realised he was just playing a psychological game with me. And that was my first experience of learning what he was doing. So I always steer on the side of harsher in training so then you get a positive confidence boost when you compete kind of internationally. And it depends sometimes. Somebody brought this up. So at the Welsh, I listened to somebody who was talking a little bit about the judging, and I said, but look, the judging panel was only 3 or 4 judges. So once you average that spread, the score's going to be higher anyway. Like, if you've got 6 E-scores or whatever it might be, you've got a bigger panel, the score's going to probably be a bit lower anyway. And they were like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So sometimes at domestic competitions you get that because the panels are a lot smaller and maybe less I don't think there was as much judging experience at the Welsh Championships than there would be, say, at the British, right? So yeah, it's kind of one of those between the two. But I felt on the whole, seeing the scores come in, that the scoring was pretty good at the Winter Cup. What did you make of Shane Whiskus? I was actually very impressed, and I felt his gymnastics was all ready. He was well prepared. He just had a bad day, and he needs to be careful not to let that get him down. Because I remember competing at the American Cup in 2017, and after I came home, the head coach just completely battered me, telling me there was a terrible performance, what happened, asked me to debrief the whole thing. And I actually went 5 for 5, and then when I got to bar, I made I fell twice on high bar, but the AAI bar was always so hard to get used to if you were from Europe. And the routine was a pretty difficult routine. It was like a 6-3 routine at the time. And it was a brand new routine. And I was like, I actually felt like I was that fine in that competition. If I'd have stayed on the bar, I would have ended up having a great score. So I think you have to work out whether I'm not prepared enough or whether it was just one of those days and I've got a bit of ring rust from not competing. And I know Shane had competed previously, but not against his main competitors, not at that high level. And now you've got Fred and Yule come in, and it's just a different thing. The pressure's different. And I felt that he looked really good. I thought his gymnastics technically was great. And even when he made his mistakes, he got back up and repeated the skills, which shows a level of confidence. So, I hope I hope he doesn't walk away from that weekend being like too disappointed with himself. I think that's just a step on the journey. And somebody in Shane's position, the reality is he's carried on because he's got the dream of an Olympics. So he doesn't need to, pin all of his hopes on this competition,
Yeah, I was surprised at his performance, and I don't think it's because he was underprepared. I will say that he, like Yule, did add quite a bit more difficulty into his routines than we had seen previously. So I don't know if that was the issue. I don't know if it was mental. I don't know if he was, fatigued from feeling unwell. I don't know what it was, but I don't think that was representative of his current level of training. He's not currently on the senior national team. I believe he would have had the option to petition again to the injury reserve team, so you can petition twice. So he petitioned in the fall and maybe would have petitioned again. We don't know, that list hasn't come out yet, but I, like you, hope that he just goes back, is able to put his head down and say, like, this was a fluke, this is not representative of who I am, and then just come back and shock the nation in August.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Can we just touch on a couple of performances, Kensley, before we kind of we look a little bit more just at Cottbus? And when we look at Cottbus, we're just going to kind of focus really on the medalists and the kind of the standout routines for you. The gymnast that finished third, I don't know him that well, although I did watch his performances last year in the NCAA finals, and I think either the Winter Cup or the US Nationals, David Shamar, is that how you say his name? Some really impressive gymnastics. I love his double pike Arabian half out on floor. I liked his handspring double front on vault. A bit different. You don't see many gymnasts perform a handspring double front as an all-arounder. Parallel bars was awesome. Was impressed with his pommels routine, other than his dismount for somebody built the way he's built. Do you think a gymnast like David is going to be in contention over the next few years for the US team when it comes to that top level? How do you think he could factor in? His parallel bars is amazing, but I just wonder whether that's an apparatus where the US maybe needs somebody or not.
Yeah, it's hard to say. So he was a very, very highly recruited junior. So he was the junior U.S. all-around champ. He made several international teams, won gold at DTB and several golds at Pan Americans for Team USA. And then he went to Stanford, and he just wasn't really making lineups, and he wasn't really performing all that well. And this isn't that unusual for athletes that go to Stanford because it's, of course, one of the most rigorous universities in the world. And so you often see where athletes their first year are just really struggling to get used to the academic side of things. And then sometimes they kind of just like pitter patter out, and sometimes they come back. And so what David said in the post meet interviews was, I had this great reputation as a junior, and I'm ready to now show the community that I have refound myself gymnastics wise. I've put in the effort, and I'm ready to show them that I can show up when it matters. So this was obviously a great start for him to show that. And there are going to be a couple other tests throughout the year to see like, okay, can he perform at the highest level? Because certainly his junior pedigree would indicate that he could be one of the best athletes, but it's something that time will tell.
Okay, amazing. And then just to finish off, I know there were some other notable performances, Kensley, but can you just give us a little bit of your big takeaways from Danila Lakin? Continues to impress me a lot with his gymnastics, particularly his high bar.
Yeah, gosh, his high bar is so gorgeous. I love a pagan. It's my favorite skill in all of gymnastics, and he does his so well. He kicks it out. He's able to grab it at arm's length. You rarely see him catch it close. Often sticks his dismount, just one of those things that you can sort of like put money on and look forward to. And, junior world silver medalist on high bar was selected. He's very young, but selected for American Cup with the likes of Yul Moldauer and Asher Hong. And he's a gymnast that really excites me, and I look forward to always to seeing what he can put up. He didn't do all around here. He didn't need to. He was already pre-qualified for the senior development team, but he actually got moved up to the senior national team based on this performance.
Oh wow, yeah, and I expect him to be very much in contention over the next few years as we go into LA. It seems like he's got a big personality as well. Gymnastics is gorgeous. It's very much that old Soviet style kind of gymnastics. Yeah. You can see it in his line. I can see it. There's so many reminiscence of the style of gymnastics that Sergey taught me and coached me with.
And he's also coached by a Sergey.
Well, there you go. Cut from the same cloth. Let's look at Cottbus, Kensley, just to finish up. I think for me, Kensley, the biggest standout was the Russian gymnast.
Really? For me, the biggest standout was the worst scoring system of all time.
In what? In what way? You mean the way that the scores were presented on the screen? Or?
It was horrendous to try and follow. Like you have to, it's like a fourth grade science fair project. Like the way you have to click it, and it wouldn't even show all the gymnasts that did all the vaults. And it was saying one of the Turkish athletes only did one vault when he actually did two. So I made the graphic, and the athletes are telling me, no, they did this. And I'm having coaches text me and be like, hey, we can't actually see what's happening in the arena, and the scoring system has gotten so bad that judges have had to resort to pen and paper for the scoring. So that to me was actually...
Really? Wow. Oh my gosh. So I'm there starting a podcast saying that everybody likes to go to Cottbus because it's the most well-established World Cup. You know what you're going to get. And actually, everybody's lost their mind and the scoring system doesn't work.
The Germans do a great job putting on events, and I love going to Germany to cover meets because they treat the media really well, and they'll always find you an answer. But I don't know what happened this meet, but it was like the scoring system imploded.
Everybody had a week off. Oh, amazing. Let's look at some of the performances then, Kensley. I spoke there about the Russian athletes. Alexander Kartsev was very, very impressive. He's from Vladimir, so Sergey's gym, so I take a keen interest in any gymnasts that come from that club. If they are somehow able to compete as a team, and I've already heard that potentially the junior team are going to be able to compete as a team, they are going to be very, very dangerous for everybody. When you think about Andrew Marinov, you think about Arseny Dukno, you add in those two gymnasts there that were competing at this competition. I think given the amount of time they've been out of international competition, you could only be from a country like Russia or China where your training is going to be state funded to keep you in the sport for long enough. If that was Great Britain or the US, the athletes would have given up so long ago. If you didn't have the opportunity to compete at these major championships, 4 or 5 years, it might end up being 6 years they can compete as a team, 7 years. Whether they even get to compete as a team, it is just purely from the gymnastics. Whatever you think of the politics of what's going on, the gymnastics is incredibly impressive. Yeah.
And Kartsev's an interesting one. I think a lot of the big Russian names like Nagorny, Daliloyan, all of those, like, for the most part, we think that they have retired. And so people think, oh, there's none of the old guard left. But that's not actually true, because Kartsev was at the 2020 Olympic Games. He was the individual athlete that Russia sent. And he was supposed to compete at the World Championships last year, but ended up dislocating his arm right before the World Championships. So he is one of kind of like this old guard veteran, maybe not as well known, but certainly probably a leader of that team.
What year was he born, Kensley? Do you know?
He was born in 2001.
Okay, so he'd be 25 this year? Mm-hmm. Okay, 25 this year. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was very impressed, to qualify for 3 finals and medal on all 3.
Yeah, I believe he came away with the most medals out of anyone.
Floor, parallel bars, and high bar. Very, very impressive. What were some of the other standout performances for you? Obviously, pommels continues to be incredibly. The standard is just so high. I think
you have the world medalist Patty Hoops missed this final. That tells you how strong this competition was. And I actually went back and looked. Because I saw a post by the Illinois gymnastics coach, Danny Ribeiro, saying that Brandon Dang had like 100% rate of making World Cup finals. And I was like, I wonder how many of these other guys do. Brandon Dang, Mamo Khachatryan, Hamlet Manukian, Nariman Kurbanov, and Aiden Lee. I think that was his first one. So it would make 100% rate for making finals.
Wow. 5
out of the 8 athletes. This is not World Challenge Cup. This is the World Cup Series. But that's an insane stat. Other cool things about pommel horse was people watching other people do their skills. So Hamlet's watching Brandon Dang do his skill. Kurbanov's watching half the field do his skill. Yeah. Sam Mikulik, who's a coach there, is watching people do his skill in pommel horse. So that was something that really stuck out to me, was how many athletes were watching each other perform skills that were named after them.
Yeah, I think for me, the Tarjeta, his routine, he's potentially the only way he can go now is add in the triple Russian on one handle, which will end up probably being his plan for the next 2 years in the build up to LA, is getting in the triple Russian on one handle. He's just doing a single at the moment at 5.9. I imagine that's where he's going to get his D score upgrades from.
Did he do an E dismount?
I don't know whether he did an E dismount. I don't really count that because they're all trying to do an E dismount. Sometimes they don't do it. So for me, I don't, I know that their incentive is to do an E dismount. If they don't make it, then, but they're, I actually use, when I'm coaching, I tell gymnasts in the gym that you get 3 strikes when you're building up to the competition. If your goal is to do an E dismount and you only do a D, that only counts as a clean routine 3 times, and on the 4th time that you do that, that's a fail. That doesn't count because mentally it switches their brain to think, oh, I can't get away with, because as soon as they're under pressure, they'll just do a D dismount. So a bit of insight into my coaching there. But I agree, pommels was amazing, continues to be amazing. I think the story this year will be those 2 generations colliding as Reese and Max come back. I think P-bars, probably we should talk about Shohei Kawakami. Obviously, he's got some incredible gymnastics on multiple apparatus. He's one of those guys that's almost probably more famous for his content, his gymnastics on social media. People probably have seen his gymnastics first on Instagram and then see him compete later on, now that he's qualifying for Japanese teams and competing at these World Cups. What do you make of his gymnastics and whether or not he's going to be a player in the team over the next few years for the Japanese?
I have to say the Japanese is the hardest team to predict, because you one year you'll have Kohei Uchimura and you're like, of course he's going to make the team. And then there are these youngins who come up behind him and he is out. And so it is impossible because the Japanese has the most stringent qualification procedures, and you have to be ready in April, not towards the World Championships in October. You have to be ready in April. So if you are not healthy and fit, then there's no wiggle room. Like, they name their team, that's it. So it comes down to can he stay healthy, and does he have enough to add to the team based on who their top all-arounders are? And I can't answer that right now. Certainly a name to keep in the running, but the Japanese team is impossible to predict.
Yeah, I certainly agree. It's one of the hardest teams to make. Any other noticeable performances before we finish off, Kensley, that stood out for you from that Copless World Cup?
Two really for me.
Okay.
The first has to be Cam Nelson on still rings, because if you had told me that the U.S. was going to leave with only one World Cup medal, I might have raised my eyebrow just like a little bit. If you had told me that medal was going to be Cam Nelson on still rings, I would have told you would have lost your mind. And I just think that that's just a testament to the work that he's been doing on still rings and strength and conditioning at Evo. So huge props to him. I would say it was a little bit of a weaker field, but still, a medal is a medal. You always say you can only compete against who you compete against. And that's exactly what he did. And then the other thing I think to highlight for me was just some things on vault. So Nazar Chapirni, highest vault total in the world thus far with a 14.716. It's quite a large mark to win by. He won by about half a point. Stuck the Dragulescu cold right down the middle, just a small hop on the Randy. Interestingly, Arjun Dovtian didn't end up competing at this event. He was on the start list to compete in qualifying, so didn't end up competing in qualifying or finals. And then was it Kawakami Shohei? Was he the one who did the Yurchenko double pike and then ended up like under the vault table like it was like a little house? Was, again, a moment for comedy. But Sol Scott from Great Britain, amazing job from him to walk away with that medal in his first World Cup.
Yeah, it's amazing that we're seeing so many Yurchenko triple twists. I remember back in 2010 seeing Nabayeva try and do Yurchenko triple twist at the Japan Cup, and she basically did a double twist and then spun around on the spot for the last full twist. But that was like one of the first times I'd ever seen anyone attempt that vault, and that was obviously on a lower vault, and it was a female that was doing that vault for the first time. If you'd have told me then that in 15 years that vault would be pretty commonplace. It's just technically such a difficult vault. It's interesting to see the technique that people go for in terms of their hand placement on the vault. So the Japanese gymnast went for two hands open, very Michaela Moroni. Sol Scott actually went for one in, one out, which was interesting. So if you go back and watch it, one hand's turned in and one's turned out into his triple twist off the vault.
Wouldn't that get an early rotation deduction?
I don't think so. I think, look, because, me technically, a technically perfect Yurchenko would be like hands turned in for me. That's what I'm aiming for. So it's interesting that he goes for 1 and 2. I imagine he does that because he gets some torque off the top, because if this hand is turned in, you're kind of already dropping your shoulder and your chest is in, and if this one's out, you can wrap in. It might be something to do with that. So, if I get the opportunity, I'm going to ask him about that at the British Championships. But amazing vault, like you said. And his gymnastics looks so unique because he's just such a different build. Sometimes it's just, there's some real value in just looking like a different human to everybody else that's competing. If everybody else is 5'5" and weighs 55 kilos, and then you're 5'10" and you're built slightly slender and you do an apparatus like vault but not pommel horse, it's unique. It looks cool. It looks a bit different, and I like that. So yeah, I agree that he's going to be certainly somebody that's pushing for the GB team. Whether or not he's going to have the firepower to go up against some of the strong apparatus guys that we've got in Great Britain this year, I just don't know. I expect big things from Harry this year. I feel like Harry's not quite, he's teased it, but not quite reached his potential on those free apparatus where he can really push for medals, and I think this year is going to be the year that he does that. I know we had a conversation at the British last year. He spoke about maybe trying a handspring triple twist. It looks like he's training the pike drag and the handspring triple twist at the moment, so it'll be exciting to see if he does any of those early in the year, but I'm expecting by the Worlds he'll be going for both of those vaults. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to, I guess. Next month in March, we're going to have the American Cup, which is very, very cool. Are you looking forward to the American Cup being back, Kensley? Obviously, growing up, that was one of the competitions I always wanted to do. What are your expectations of that event going into it?
American Cup is always one of my favorites. It's where I kind of started out volunteering with USA Gymnastics and learning more about the sport. And it was always so nice to see the international athletes and their coaching style and how they approached competition. I'm excited just purely from the standpoint of it's going to be a new format, and we're going to sort of get a glimpse at how this works in men and women. And I'm curious to see if we'll get more eyes on men's gymnastics because of the women competing there. So very much looking forward to it.
Amazing. Yeah, and I think from a British perspective, I'm excited to be back in that arena at the British Championships and just to see. It's very unknown at the moment, if I'm honest. Like, I don't know what Jamie's obviously the reigning British champion. Everybody seems to have completely forgot about him. 12 months ago, everyone was saying, like, Jamie's the man, he's looking really, really strong. So whether or not he's fit and healthy and he's going to be in contention for the all-around title, how many apparatus Jake's going to do, I just don't know. I think Jake is almost similar to Fred, and he has his own kind of plan of what he's going to do, and he's kind of just looking at those big events now. Max is obviously going to compete. We've got a lot of younger gymnasts. I'm super interested in the under-18s competition and seeing all of those guys go up against each other for that Junior Europeans team that's going to take place later this summer. If we get to see a Russian team at the Junior Europeans, that'll be exciting to see them go against the British, the French gymnasts. So that's going to be pretty cool. The Italians are very strong as juniors now. So yeah, loads to look forward to as we go into March. This is kind of a gymnastics show that I do once a month now, Kensley. So thank you for joining me on the second one. I'll look forward to the one in March. Where can people keep following the work that you're doing over the next month and into the future, Kensley? And if they don't follow you already, how can they follow you and the work that you do?
You can follow us on Neutral Deductions on YouTube and on Instagram, and then Kensley on Twitter or X and Blue Sky.
Amazing. Kensley, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll do this a couple of times this year, and maybe we'll even meet in person at some point as well.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.